Hey, BC here. Welcome to BC Nephro. Thanks for watching. So what is the expression, trust your gut? What does it mean to you? And how does it apply to the fractional excretion of sodium? Well, I'll tell you what it means to me. Trust your gut means for me to trust my instincts and to have confidence in myself. So there's two parts of that. The first part is that if something doesn't seem right, I should take a step back, look at it again, maybe look at it from a different perspective, because if it doesn't seem right, it probably isn't right. Second part is to have confidence in myself so that I don't go along with something that I don't believe is right or I don't believe is true. So how does this apply to the fractional excretion of sodium? So we're going to tell you the fractional excretion of sodium first, what it is, tell us how we're supposed to interpret it, and ways where we need to look at it from a different perspective because it may be misleading us and we should trust our gut impression. So the fractional excretion of sodium, what is it? Well, it is the amount of sodium that is filtered by the glomerulus that ends up excreted in the urine. So the amount of sodium excreted in the urine is essentially how much sodium is eaten in the diet. Steady state, what comes in must go out. So let's say, for an example, if someone eats 4 grams of sodium a day, so 4 grams, 4,000 milligrams, you multiply that by the molecular weight of sodium, which is 23. That means in a day, they've ingested 17,500 milliequivalents of sodium, and that's how much needs to come out in the urine. So how much is filtered by the glomerulus? Well, the glomerulus, a normal GFR, is 125 mLs per minute. And the normal concentration of sodium is 140 milliequivalents of sodium per liter. So it turns out there's a lot of sodium filtered by the glomerulus in a day, like 25 million milliequivalents. So the fractional excretion of sodium, if you eat 4 grams, is 17,000 over 25 million. It's less than 1%. It's 0.3%. So this is normal kidneys, I guess relatively normal sodium intake. This is what you're going to have, less than 1%. What is it trying to tell us? So what it's trying to tell us is if the kidney tubules are working. So we're trying to use it in an oliguric patient to see if the tubules are working, and you should be oliguric because you need to be, or if you're oliguric because the tubules aren't working, maybe because you have acute tubular necrosis. So this is what it's trying to tell us. So if the tubules are working, they should be reabsorbing sodium, and your fractional excretion of sodium should be low, typically less than 1%. If your tubules are damaged because you have ATN, they've died, they've necrosed, then they're not going to be working properly, and your fractional excretion of sodium is going to be higher. Some people say higher than 1%, some people say higher than 2%. So how do you calculate it? So most people would calculate it by just going through an app on their phone, plugging in the numbers, and having it spit out. So this is the first part of trusting your gut. If that calculation that you enter into your app doesn't make sense with the clinical picture, you need to take a step back and maybe recalculate. So by recalculating, you should know the formula yourself. Now you can look it up, but you should know the formula yourself and do the calculation yourself. Now the easy way for me to remember is U over P sodium over creatinine. So I can remember urine over plasma, sodium, all over urine over plasma, creatinine. So it's the 4 steps there. And I can remember that off the top of my head, or do the calculator on my phone and see if it jives with what the app got me. The other part of trusting your gut is not to go along with something that you don't believe is right. So if I'm assessing the patient and I think they're pre-renal by history and physical, but the fractional excretion of sodium is high, more likely is a reason to explain why it's high. If I think there's something, the patient is not pre-renal and the fractional excretion of sodium is low, then there may be something else going on. So what else can be going on? So I'll tell you about some things. High fractional excretion of sodium, but the patient is pre-renal. Why could that happen? So I'll give you a couple reasons. One, which is kind of intuitive and obvious, is the patient's on diuretics. They're on diuretics, they're over-diuresed, they're pre-renal because of that. The fractional excretion of sodium is high because of the diuretics. So in that case, take a step back, maybe hold the diuretics, reassess, maybe do a fractional excretion or urea to assess that. Another reason, a patient with upper GI losses, vomiting, NG tube losses. What's going on with this patient? They're volume depleted because of all this vomit or the NG losses. So they're pre-renal, they're volume depleted. But what's going to happen to the urine sodium? So if in these patients, they often have a metabolic alkalosis because they're losing hydrogen chloride. If you have a metabolic alkalosis, the kidneys may compensate by having bicarbonate in the urine. Now, when bicarbonate gets to the distal tubule, it cannot be reabsorbed by the distal tubule. As an anion, it needs to come with a cation. So it needs to drag either potassium or sodium with it. So the urine sodium may be high in a patient who is pre-renal, volume depleted from upper GI losses. In this case, this is why for metabolic alkalosis, they say to check out urine chloride. The urine chloride would be low. Well, another reason would be contrast. So contrast nephropathy, radiocontrast can constrict the afferent arteriole and cause a low FeNA, even though the patient has contrast nephropathy, a form of ATN. Another reason for a low FeNA, the patient's not pre-renal, is actually patients with acute glomerulonephritis and RPGN in the original studies often had a low FeNA, but that patient is not pre-renal. So a low FeNA doesn't necessarily mean pre-renal. A FeNA that's not low doesn't necessarily mean that they're not pre-renal. Lesson here, trust your instincts, trust your impression from your history and physical. Use the FeNA for supplementary information. If it doesn't make sense, think of some other reasons why to explain why it would not make sense instead of going against what you believe is the diagnosis. So that's it. Again, thanks for watching. Any questions or comments, leave them below. Future topics, leave them below. Link to an article on this at bcnephro.com. Email me, brian@bcnephro.com. And until next time.